She fed her for 6 years. She furnished her house, paid her tuition, and got her the job. And the first time Vivien brought a man home to meet her fat friend, she humiliated her in front of him like she was a joke waiting to be told. What Vivien didn't know was that the man would leave her that same night and come back a year later to marry the friend she mocked. Stay until the end, because what Jane does to Vivien in the final scene is something nobody saw coming. And if stories about loyalty, betrayal, and quiet revenge move you, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because more stories like this one are coming. Jane was born into a family that many people admired. Her parents were wealthy, kind, and always made sure she had everything she needed. She never lacked food, good clothes, quality education, or comfort. To outsiders, Jane seemed like the luckiest girl in the world. But there was a pain she carried quietly in her heart, a pain that no amount of money could remove. From childhood, Jane struggled with her weight. While other girls her age wore their confidence proudly, Jane often hid behind oversized clothes and forced smiles. Everywhere she went, people judged her before they even spoke to her. Some laughed, some whispered, others simply looked at her with pity. As she grew older, the comments grew harsher. She's pretty, but she's too fat. Imagine how beautiful she would be if she lost weight. Who would want to date someone like her? Jane heard those words so many times that eventually she stopped pretending they didn't hurt. She smiled when people were watching, but when she was alone, she often stared at herself in the mirror and wondered why she could never be enough. When she gained admission into the university, she told herself that things would be different. She believed she was finally leaving the past behind. She imagined making new friends, creating beautiful memories, and experiencing the kind of life she had always dreamed of. But reality was far different. During her first weeks on campus, she noticed how people looked at her. Some students laughed openly, others avoided sitting beside her. Whenever groups formed for discussions or social activities, she was usually the last person considered. Sometimes she sat alone during lunch while other students chatted and laughed together. She often pretended to be busy with her phone just so people would not notice how lonely she was. One afternoon, while sitting alone under a shade, slowly eating her lunch, she heard a cheerful voice. "Hi, is this seat taken?" Jane looked up. Standing before her was a young woman with bright eyes and a confident smile. "No," Jane replied softly. "You can sit." The young woman sat down immediately. "I'm Vivien, first-year accounting student. What about you?" Jane smiled nervously. "I'm Jane." "Nice to meet you, Jane." For the first time in a long while, someone sat with her willingly. They talked for nearly an hour that afternoon. Jane went back to her hostel happier than she had been in months. What she did not know was that Vivien had noticed something many others had also noticed. Jane came from a wealthy family. Vivien came from a completely different world. Her parents worked hard every day just to survive. Some semesters paying tuition became a struggle. Buying textbooks was difficult. Even feeding herself properly sometimes felt like a luxury. Vivien hated living that way. More than anything, she wanted a comfortable life. Expensive clothes, designer handbags, fancy restaurants, and everything money could buy. When she noticed Jane's loneliness, an idea formed in her mind. While Jane saw friendship, Vivien saw opportunity. Soon they became inseparable. Jane was overjoyed. Finally, she had someone she could call her friend, someone who laughed with her, spent time with her, and seemed to genuinely care. Whenever Jane introduced Vivien to her parents during phone calls, her face lit up with excitement. "Mom, she's my best friend." "That's wonderful," her mother would say. "You sound happy." "I am happy, Mom, really happy." But behind Jane's back, a very different story was unfolding. One evening, Vivien sat with a group of friends in their hostel. One of them frowned and asked, I still don't understand. Why are you always with Jane? Another laughed. Seriously? Out of everyone on campus? Why her? Vivien smirked and crossed her arms. You people worry too much. Then tell us, one friend insisted. Vivien laughed softly before lowering her voice. Trust me, I know exactly what I'm doing. Once I've gotten everything I need from her, I'll walk away. The group burst into laughter. So you're using her? Someone asked. Vivien shrugged. Let's just say I'm being smart. While those conversations happened behind closed doors, Jane continued giving without limits. Whenever Vivien struggled to pay school fees, Jane quietly paid the balance. Whenever Vivien admired a dress in a store, Jane bought it for her. Whenever Vivien needed money, Jane never asked questions. Jane, I don't know how I'll survive this month, Vivien would say sadly. Jane would immediately open her purse. Take this. You can pay me back whenever you're able. Vivien never paid her back. Not once. Years passed, and their friendship continued. Vivien became so dependent on Jane that every problem somehow became Jane's responsibility. Jane, can I have some of your food? Of course. Jane, I need money urgently. Okay. Jane, can you help me with this? Sure. Jane never complained. The truth was simple. She was terrified of losing the only friend she had. To her, keeping Vivien happy felt worth every sacrifice. Eventually, university came to an end. Through the influence and connections of Jane's parents, both young women secured jobs at a reputable company. When Vivien received the news, she screamed with excitement. I got the job! I got the job! But even that blessing had come through Jane. Yet Vivien never paused to appreciate how much Jane had done for her. Instead, she quickly began planning her next advantage. Not long after they started working, Vivien approached Jane with another suggestion. Why don't we live together? She asked one evening. Jane smiled. Really? Of course. We're best friends. It will be fun. Jane immediately agreed. She never suspected Vivien's real reason. The house they moved into was funded almost entirely by Jane. The rent, the furniture, the appliances, the decorations, all came from Jane's pocket. Her parents regularly sent food supplies that filled the kitchen. Their family driver took both women to work every morning and brought them home every evening. Vivien contributed almost nothing, yet she behaved as though she owned the place. She invited friends over whenever she wanted. Some evenings, Jane returned from work to find strangers sitting comfortably in the living room. Food disappeared from the refrigerator without explanation. Loud gatherings continued late into the night. One evening, Jane finally gathered enough courage to speak. Vivien, I don't mind your friends visiting, but could you please tell me beforehand? Vivien rolled her eyes immediately. Jane, you are overreacting again. I'm not overreacting, I just wanted a little notice. Seriously, must everything be a problem with you? Jane's shoulders dropped. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. Vivien sighed dramatically. You are too sensitive. A few moments later, Jane found herself apologizing. I'm sorry, forget I mentioned it. Vivien smiled, satisfied. That's better. And so the pattern continued. Jane gave, Vivien took, Jane apologized, Vivien demanded more. One called it friendship, the other called it opportunity, and sadly only one of them truly believed they were friends. One quiet afternoon, Jane sat outside the house, enjoying the cool breeze. A small bowl of snacks rested on her lap as she watched the day pass peacefully. Moments like that had become her escape. Whenever the house felt crowded or her thoughts became too heavy, she would sit outside alone and enjoy the silence. She lifted another snack to her mouth and smiled softly to herself. For once, there was no noise, no judgment, and no uncomfortable conversations. Then she heard footsteps. Looking up, she saw Vivien walking through the gate. Beside her was a handsome young man Jane had never seen before, tall, neatly dressed, carrying himself with quiet confidence. Jane immediately stood up, her face brightening with a warm smile. For years, she had listened to Vivien talk about relationships. She assumed Vivien had finally brought someone special home to introduce properly. "Vivien?" Jane said cheerfully, dusting crumbs from her hands. "You didn't tell me you were bringing a guest." For a brief second, Jane expected a smile in return. Instead, Vivien burst into loud laughter, sharp enough to make Jane instantly uncomfortable. Turning to the young man, Vivien pointed directly at Jane. "Babe, meet my fat friend I've been telling you about." Jane's smile vanished instantly. The words hit her like a slap. "This girl can eat," Vivien continued, laughing. "Honestly, I think eating is her full-time job. If food could talk, it would probably beg Jane for mercy." Michael looked uncomfortable, but Vivien kept going, performing for an audience that wasn't there. "You should see the amount of food she finishes in a day. Sometimes I wonder if she ever gets tired of chewing." Jane stood frozen, her fingers tightening around the bowl. This wasn't a stranger humiliating her. This was the person she had called her best friend for years, the person she had trusted, the person she had sacrificed everything for. Without a word, she turned and rushed into the house. The moment her bedroom door closed, tears streamed down her face. Outside, silence fell between Vivien and Michael. "What?" Vivien asked with a shrug. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Vivien, what was that?" "What was what?" "The way you just spoke to your friend. You embarrassed her for no reason." "Oh, please. She's used to it." "Used to it? Come on, Michael. It was just a joke." "No, it wasn't," he said, his voice firm. "A joke makes people laugh. That made her cry." "You're taking this too seriously." "No, you're not taking it seriously enough." Vivien looked surprised. "She's my friend." "Exactly. If this is how you treat someone you call a friend, I don't want to imagine how you treat someone you dislike." Vivien's smile disappeared. "Are you seriously angry over this?" "I'm not angry," Michael said. "I'm disappointed." He shook his head. "I don't think this relationship can continue." Vivien's eyes widened. "You're breaking up with me because of Jane?" "No," Michael said, looking directly at her. "I'm ending this because of you, because kindness matters to me, respect matters to me, and what I just witnessed was neither." He stepped back. "If you can treat your closest friend like this, I don't want to imagine how you'll treat me someday." He turned and walked away. Vivien stood there in disbelief. By the time it hit her, he was already gone. Instead of reflecting, anger filled her heart instead. "This is all Jane's fault," she muttered. "If she hadn't run away crying, none of this would have happened." Months passed. Life slowly moved forward. Jane never forgot that afternoon. But she gradually recovered, focusing on work and spending more time by herself. The wound remained, but it no longer felt as sharp. Then one afternoon, while shopping alone, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Jane!" She turned. A man stood a few feet away, smiling politely. "I'm sorry," she said. "Do I know you?" "Michael." The name brought back memories she wished she could forget. "Oh, it's you." She turned to leave. "Please wait," Michael said gently. Jane stopped. "I don't want to bother you. I just wanted to say hello. I really should go." "Jane, please, just give me 1 minute." Reluctantly, she nodded. "I've wanted to apologize for a long time," Michael said. "Apologize for what?" "For that day. I know I wasn't the one who insulted you, but I still wish I'd handled things differently. You didn't deserve what happened." Jane lowered her eyes. Even after months, hearing someone acknowledge her pain made her emotional. "Thank you," she whispered. "And for what it's worth," Michael added, "I never agreed with anything Vivien said." "That's kind of you." Michael hesitated. Can I be honest? Jane looked up. You are beautiful, Jane. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the words sounded unbelievable. Nobody had ever said that to her with sincerity. You don't have to say that, she said quietly. I'm not saying it to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's true. For the first time in her life, a man was looking at her with genuine admiration instead of pity. And somewhere inside, a wounded part of her began to wonder if she had spent years seeing herself only through the eyes of her critics. For several days afterward, Jane couldn't stop thinking about that conversation. It wasn't because he was handsome or because he'd approached her first. It was the way he had spoken to her. No pity, no mockery, no cruel joke disguised as concern. He had spoken to her like she mattered. A few days later, Michael called. Hi, Jane. I hope I'm not disturbing you. No, you're not. A brief silence. I was wondering if you'd have lunch with me this weekend. No, Michael. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because you dated Vivien. Jane, that relationship ended the moment I saw how she treated you. Still, it feels wrong. Does it feel wrong because of Vivien? Or because you're afraid people will judge you? The question caught her off guard. She said nothing. I'm only asking for lunch, Michael continued softly. One lunch, nothing more. No pressure, no expectations. Just lunch. Just lunch, and after that, you can decide if you ever want to see me again. Jane found herself smiling despite trying not to. You're very persistent. I've been told that before. She finally agreed. The day arrived and Jane spent nearly an hour deciding what to wear, nervous in a way she hadn't been in years. When she got there, Michael was waiting. You look lovely, he said. She looked away. Compliments always made her uncomfortable. Throughout lunch, something unexpected happened. Michael listened, truly listened. He asked questions, remembered details, laughed at her stories, never interrupted, never looked distracted. For the first time, Jane felt like someone genuinely wanted to know her. Not her family, not her money, not her appearance. Her. What do you enjoy doing when you're alone? He asked at one point. Jane blinked, surprised. Nobody's ever asked me that before. Then I'm glad I did. She thought for a moment. I like reading. I like quiet places. Sometimes I sit outside and watch people. Why? Because watching people is easier than talking to them, she admitted with a small laugh. Michael nodded thoughtfully. That sounds lonely. It is. Sometimes. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. As the weeks passed, their lunches became regular conversations. Their conversations became friendship. Their friendship slowly became something deeper, though neither rushed to name it. Then one afternoon, Michael carefully approached a topic he knew was sensitive. Can I ask you something? Of course. Have you ever considered losing weight? Jane's smile faded. It was a question she'd heard her entire life. Seeing her reaction, Michael continued quickly. Please let me finish. I'm not saying you need to change for anyone, and I'm definitely not saying you're not beautiful. But I've seen how people's comments affect you. I've seen how much pain you've carried because of how others treat you. Jane lowered her eyes. Sometimes I feel like no matter what I do, people only see my size. That's exactly why I'm asking. If you ever decide losing weight would help you feel healthier, stronger, more confident, I'll support you. And if I don't, then I'll support you anyway. The choice has to be yours, Jane, not mine, not society's, yours. That conversation stayed with her for days. In the past, every attempt had come from pain. She wanted to lose weight because people mocked her, rejected her, made her feel unworthy. But now something had changed. This time, she wanted to do it for herself. When she finally told Michael she wanted to begin, His face lit up. "Then we'll do it together." And they did. Their mornings began before sunrise. They walked together. "My legs hurt," Jane complained. "Keep walking," Michael would say. "I'm tired." "5 more minutes." "I hate this." He would laugh. "No, you don't. You just hate it today." They spent time at the gym, planned meals together, celebrated small victories. The journey was far from easy. Some days Jane wanted to quit. Some days she stood in front of the mirror and saw no difference at all. "I can't do this anymore," she said one evening after a hard workout. Michael sat beside her. "Yes, you can. Nothing is changing. Everything is changing. You just can't see it yet. What if I fail? Then we'll try again tomorrow." Slowly, week after week, the changes appeared. Her clothes fit differently. She had more energy. She smiled more often. Months passed, and the transformation became impossible to ignore. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was emotional. The woman who once avoided mirrors now smiled at her reflection. The woman who once apologized for existing now walked with confidence. The woman who once believed she was unworthy of love was finally beginning to see her own value. Back at home, Vivien noticed everything. Jane seemed happier than she'd ever been. She laughed more. She carried herself differently. There was a glow about her that hadn't existed before, and it bothered Vivien deeply. "So, who's the guy?" Vivien asked one evening. "What guy? The one making you smile at your phone every 5 minutes?" "Nobody." "Come on, tell me." "There's nothing to tell." But Vivien wasn't convinced. As the weeks passed, she grew increasingly obsessed with finding out who Jane was seeing, peeking at her phone, asking questions whenever Jane went out. Jane revealed nothing. Michael had asked her to keep their relationship private until the right time, and she respected that. The more secretive Jane became, the more frustrated Vivien grew. She could feel that something important was happening, and it ate at her. One evening, Jane returned home earlier than usual. She entered quietly and paused when she heard laughter from the living room. Vivien was there with her friends, gossiping. Jane recognized that laughter, the same kind she'd heard many times before, aimed at her. She stayed out of sight and listened. "I'm telling you," Vivien said confidently, waving her hand. "Whoever Jane is dating must be fat, too. There's no way a normal man would be interested in her." Her friends burst into laughter. "Maybe they met at a buffet," another joked. More laughter. Jane closed her eyes briefly. Months ago, those words would have broken her heart. Not anymore. She calmly stepped into the room in her gym clothes. The laughter died instantly. Silence filled the room. Vivien nearly choked. Jane stood tall and confident, the transformation impossible to ignore. For the first time, Vivien had no joke to make. Jane simply smiled politely and walked past them toward the kitchen. Nobody said a word. More months passed, and Jane finally reached her goal. She looked incredible. But what truly amazed people was her confidence. She no longer lowered her head when entering a room. She no longer apologized for taking up space. She no longer searched for approval in people's faces. She knew her worth, and that made her shine brighter than anything else could. One evening, Vivien walked in unusually excited. "Jane, I've decided I want to meet this mysterious boyfriend of yours." Jane smiled. "You do?" "Of course. You've been hiding him for too long." Jane nodded calmly and picked up her phone. A brief call. "He's on his way." Vivien sat up. "Really?" A few minutes later, the door opened. Michael walked in. Vivien's face lost all color. Her body froze. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things. "Michael," she whispered. Before she could say another word, Jane crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. Michael smiled and held her close. The room went silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Jane turned toward Vivien. Years of memories flashed through her mind. Every insult, every cruel joke, every moment of laughter behind her back. Every moment she'd been used, mocked, humiliated by the person she called her best friend. Yet when she spoke, her voice was calm. "Vivien, I've known for a long time." "Known what?" "I've known about the gossip. I've known about the insults. I've known about the jokes you and your friends made about me. I knew you stayed in my life because of what you could gain from me. I knew much more than you ever imagined." Tears formed in Vivien's eyes. "Jane, that's not true." "Please don't insult my intelligence," Jane said gently. "I heard things. I saw things. I just chose to ignore them." "Why?" Vivien asked weakly. "Because I was afraid of being alone," Jane said. "I thought having a fake friend was better than having no friend at all." She took a breath. "But not anymore. I finally understand that my value doesn't depend on what other people think of me." Vivien broke down crying. "Jane, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I made mistakes. I was stupid. Please don't do this. You're my friend." Jane listened quietly. When Vivien finished, she replied calmly, "Keep your apology." Vivien froze. "What?" "I forgive you," Jane said softly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean giving you access to my life again." She let the words land. "You have 1 hour to pack your belongings and leave this house." "Jane, please. My decision is final." Then she added something Vivien never expected. "And don't worry, I won't ask my parents to take away your job." Vivien looked up, stunned. "You won't?" "No. Even though I could." Jane's voice stayed steady. "Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to become the kind of person you were to me." The room fell silent once more. For the first time, Vivien truly understood what she had lost. Vivien walked slowly into her room and closed the door. For several minutes, she simply stood there, staring at the walls. The reality of what had happened was finally sinking in. With trembling hands, she began packing. Every dress reminded her of Jane. Every pair of shoes reminded her of Jane. Every comfort she'd enjoyed for years had somehow come from Jane's kindness. By the time she packed the last suitcase, she could barely see through her tears. The bags felt heavier than they really were, not because of what was inside them, but because of what she was leaving behind. She wasn't losing a house. She wasn't losing comfort. She was losing the one person who had genuinely cared for her when she had nothing. When she finally dragged her luggage to the living room, Jane and Michael were standing quietly together. "I wish I could change everything," Vivien whispered. Jane looked at her calmly and said nothing. Some wounds were simply too deep for words. Vivien nodded sadly, picked up her bags, and walked toward the door. Just before stepping outside, she turned one last time, and for a brief moment saw the friendship she had thrown away with her own hands. Then she left. As the door closed behind her, she realized she had destroyed the best friendship she would ever have. Life continued. Michael and Jane grew even closer, their relationship built on honesty, respect, and genuine affection. Michael never made Jane feel like she needed to become someone else to be loved. One evening, under a beautiful sky, he took her hand and smiled. "Jane, you changed my life the day I met you." "You changed mine too," she said softly. Michael got down on one knee. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Jane's eyes. Not tears of pain this time, but tears of happiness. "Yes," she said. 1,000 times, yes. Their wedding was filled with laughter, joy, and love. Not because Jane had become slimmer. Not because she looked different, but because she had finally found someone who loved her exactly as she was. Michael respected her, protected her, encouraged her, celebrated every victory, no matter how small. Together they built the life Jane had once only dreamed about. Jane continued maintaining her healthy lifestyle, but not out of fear of gaining weight again, and not because Michael expected it. She did it because she genuinely loved how healthy, strong, and confident she felt. Years later, Vivien eventually got married too. Life moved forward for everyone, but one regret never left her heart. Sometimes she sat quietly and remembered Jane, the friend who had stood by her during her hardest days, who had paid her fees, shared her blessings, opened her home, treated her like family. And she remembered how she had repaid that kindness with mockery, selfishness, and betrayal. Each memory hurt more than the last. The greatest loss in Vivien's life was not money, nor opportunities, nor relationships. It was losing the one true friend who had loved her sincerely. Jane's story became a reminder of something simple. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. Some people abuse loyalty because they believe it will last forever. But every heart has a limit. Jane's greatest transformation was never the weight she lost. It was discovering her worth. The day she realized her value didn't depend on other people's opinions was the day her life truly changed. And once she understood that, she never again let anyone treat her as less than she deserved. Because the people who truly love you will never make you feel small just to make themselves feel important. Value those who stand beside you sincerely, because one day the person you take for granted may become the greatest loss of your life.